Hey, Southwest, Ricky Jenkins here. So last weekend, we were continuing on in our series called Legacy, the Biblical Vision of Discipleship. Last weekend's conversation was about how to be more doctrinal in our discipleship. Discipleship is doctrinal. We need to show up for the Timothys in our life by bringing to bear what God's word says about what we're called to be and do in our lives. So we're talking about how to be more doctrinal, but we thought we'd follow up on the conversation with some very clear and distinct how-tos. In other words, how can you in your discipleship relationships be more doctrinal? So I want to give you 3 easy steps to start the journey of showing up more with doctrine in the engagement with your disciples. Here's number one. Number one, perform a biblical assessment of your Timothys. Perform a biblical assessment for your Timothys. You know, a lot of times we start a new discipleship group, but we just kind of assume what they need instead of actually investigating what they need. So the way you can probably cut a few corners and kind of get to the meat of the sandwich, if you will, as to what it really means for your disciples to be empowered and equipped by you, actually investigate as to what they need. Online, there are all sorts of quick and easy survey resources that investigate your Timothy's biblical awareness. They can investigate what Bible books they understand or that they've been through. They can investigate as to, what doctrines they know or don't know, what relevant pieces of history that they're aware of and unaware of. And in so doing, in about 10, 15 minutes, you automatically know what it is your disciples need from you and what they don't need from you. It's a biblical assessment. In fact, online right now, we've got southwestchurch.com. You can download some of those links that can help you assess where your people are and know exactly how to engage them. The second tool is for you to employ diversity when you teach. Employ diversity when you teach. More than anything, they need to hear from you. They need to see your life. But how many of you know that not any of us has everything that our Timothys need to be able to make Jesus famous in their lives? And so I've always found it helpful to make sure that it's not just me teaching them, but I'm also welcoming other leaders, other men, other thinkers, other preachers, other teachers. Case in point, when it's time for us to preach about money and stewardship, I'm fairly good, but I know so many more in my church that are even far better at it than me. When I'm talking about raising kids, well, I've got a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. I know nothing of what it means to raise a 25-year-old, and so I need diversity in teachers who have the experience that I don't, and what ends up happening is that the more diverse the meal is, the more stronger the Timothy is. So you need to perform a biblical assessment for your Timothys. You need to employ diversity when you teach. And then lastly, and finally, make sure that you make your Timothys teach. Make your Timothys teach. The old adage says that we remember about 10% of what we see, about 50% of what we hear, but 90% of what we do. The idea is that Christianity is as Christianity does. Jesus was the ace of this. You see Jesus starting out his ministry around Matthew 4, Matthew 5, and he's preaching the Sermon on the Mount, but then chapters 8 and 9, he starts to perform miracle after miracle. And then as early as chapter 9 and 10, he calls disciples to himself. He starts to build relationship with them, and then he tells them to go out by twos and go actually preach the gospel themselves. Here's what's interesting. Jesus himself hadn't been on the job but a few weeks. But even early in their discipleship journey, Jesus says, you know what? You guys are going to really capture this by doing this. So one of the things I found helpful as I'm starting a new discipleship group is that, for a few months, I'll build the foundation. I'll kind of describe for them what excellence is, if you will. But then after that, I'll teach one, but then I'll make them take turns to teach the lesson. I help them through the week to make sure that they're going to be well prepared. But how many of you know that the best school is the school of experience? I was pastored by my grandfather who taught me how to preach, and I'll never forget him saying, hey, I want you to preach, and I want you to preach, and I want you to preach, when I was still early on, and I would say, Granddad, I still hadn't learned everything, and he would say, son, it takes preaching to make a preacher. Same thing in discipleship, it takes teaching to make a teacher. These are 3 tools to be more doctrinal in your discipleship. I want to applaud you for taking on the calling that God has placed on your life to make his name famous through making disciples. More to come as we move forward in the future. We're a church that loves discipleship. I'll see you next time.